golden rays of morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of Alan Reeves's mansion, a house so grand it looked more like a palace than a home. Expensive paintings lined the marble walls, chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, and silence ruled the vast rooms. But despite all the beauty, Alan Reeves, a man in his mid-40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, sat alone in his leather chair, sipping black coffee with a bitterness that matched his heart. Alan had built his empire from scratch, from sleeping in a rented apartment to owning hotels, companies, and lands across the city. Success had made him rich, but it had also made him cold. He trusted no one, not friends, not employees, and definitely not the people who worked under his roof. Years ago, his personal butler, the one he treated like family, had stolen a diamond watch worth thousands. Since that day, Alan believed that every poor person had a hidden price. Everyone sells their honesty when offered enough, he would often say. But there was one person in his mansion who didn't fit that image, Maria, his maid. Maria had worked for him for nearly 3 years. She was in her early 30s, graceful but humble, always wearing simple clothes and a warm smile. She spoke softly, worked hard, and never once asked for anything beyond her pay. Every morning she arrived on time, rain or shine, and began cleaning the mansion with quiet dedication. Alan often watched her from a distance. There was something about her that annoyed him, her kindness. It seemed too good to be true. He wondered if it was just a mask. So one day, while reading his newspaper, Alan murmured to himself, "No one is that honest. Not in this world. I'll find out who she really is." That night, he devised a plan, a trap that would reveal Maria's true colors. He entered his private office, where a large safe stood behind a painting. Inside were bundles of cash, gold coins, and confidential documents. He purposely left the door wide open, with stacks of money visibly sticking out. Then, he hid a tiny camera in a corner of the room, disguised as a decorative clock. Alan smirked. "Let's see how long your honesty lasts, Maria." The next morning, the mansion came alive with the quiet hum of routine. The gardener trimmed hedges, the cook prepared breakfast, and Maria arrived with her usual polite smile. "Good morning, sir," she said as she walked past the dining hall. Alan nodded coldly, pretending to read his paper. "Morning," he muttered, though his eyes flickered toward the hallway camera feed on his tablet. He had arranged everything, the safe, the setup, the test. All he had to do now was wait. Maria began her day as usual. She cleaned the living room, polished the silver frames, and dusted the library shelves. Her movements were calm, deliberate, almost musical. But soon, her path brought her to the office, the one room Alan had been watching for hours. As she entered, the faint hum of the camera activated, capturing every second. Alan leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Maria's eyes immediately noticed something unusual. The large steel door of the safe stood wide open. Inside lay bundles of cash, gold necklaces, and sparkling stones. Enough money to change anyone's life, forever. She froze for a moment. Her reflection stared back at her from the safe's polished metal surface. She looked around, confused. No one was in sight. Alan's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "There it is," he whispered. "Now show me what you're really like." For a full minute, Maria just stood there, thinking. Her breathing grew shallow and her hand slowly rose to her chest. Then she took a deep breath and stepped closer. Alan's heart raced. "Go ahead," he muttered under his breath. "Take it. Everyone does." But what she did next made him frown in surprise. Maria didn't reach for the cash. Instead, she gently pushed the safe door closed halfway, as if to hide it from sight. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Alan's smirk faded when he saw her lips move. "Sir," she said softly into the phone, "I think you might have forgotten to lock your safe this morning. There's a lot of money inside. Please come quickly before someone else enters the room. I'll wait here to make sure nothing happens." Alan blinked in disbelief. She was calling him. He stood up abruptly, his chair screeching across the marble floor. For a moment he considered not going. Maybe it was part of her act. Maybe she knew about the camera. But curiosity got the better of him. A few moments later, he walked into the office pretending to be surprised. "What's going on here?" he asked, frowning. Maria stepped aside and pointed to the safe. "It was open when I came in, sir. I didn't touch anything, but I was worried someone might take advantage." Alan walked up to the safe, glancing briefly at the untouched piles inside. Then he turned toward her, his voice flat. "You didn't touch anything?" "No, sir," she replied calmly. "I would never." Alan studied her face. There was no fear, no guilt, no hesitation. Her eyes held nothing but simple concern. "Fine," he said after a pause. "You can go finish your work in the garden." "Yes, sir," she nodded, and quietly left the room. As soon as she was gone, Alan turned toward the hidden camera. He rewound the footage, eyes scanning every frame, every step, every movement. Not once had she reached for the money. Not even a glance of greed crossed her face. Alan leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the screen. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't quite name: shame. Why had he expected her to fail? Why had he wanted her to? He sat in silence, the sound of the ticking wall clock echoing through the empty room. For years, Alan had believed that money could buy everything: power, loyalty, respect, even love. But here was a woman who had nothing, yet refused to take what wasn't hers. He rubbed his temples, trying to shake the guilt, but it clung to him like a shadow. Hours later, he called his security chief. "Take out all the footage from the office cameras," he ordered, "and don't tell Maria anything about this." That night, Alan couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing Maria's gentle voice in his head. "Please come quickly before someone steals something." He thought of how easily she could have taken just one note, one coin, and changed her life. But she didn't. In that quiet darkness, Alan Reeves, a man who trusted no one, began to question the way he saw the world. He had set a trap for his maid. But somehow, he was the one who got caught, trapped between guilt, admiration, and something even deeper. For the first time in years, Alan realized that maybe money wasn't the only thing that measured worth. And that single thought was enough to keep him awake all night. Alan Reeves woke up the next morning with heavy eyes. He hadn't slept a minute. The memory of Maria's honesty replayed in his mind like a film he couldn't turn off. Every scene, the open safe, her gentle voice on the phone, the look of concern on her face, haunted him. He had set the perfect trap, expecting greed. Instead, he had found purity. As the morning sun touched his marble floor, Alan walked into his study and poured himself a cup of coffee. But it tasted different now, bitter not from the brew, but from guilt. He glanced toward the corner of the room where the hidden camera had been. He'd removed it the night before. The test was over, but the shame it brought remained. When Maria arrived that morning, she greeted him as she always did, with a kind smile. "Good morning, sir." Alan looked up from his newspaper, his throat tightening. For the first time, he noticed the faint tiredness under her eyes, the small cracks on her hands, the simplicity of her shoes. She wasn't someone who pretended to be humble. She was humble. "Good morning," he replied softly. Maria blinked, slightly surprised. She couldn't remember the last time he'd answered politely. Alan watched her as she moved around the dining hall, setting things in order. Her movements were graceful, unhurried. Every now and then she hummed a soft tune, something peaceful, something pure. After breakfast, Alan called her into his office. "Maria," he said, gesturing toward the chair opposite his desk. "Sit down." She looked startled. "Sir, did I do something wrong?" "No, not at all," he said quickly. "I just want to talk." Maria hesitated before sitting down. Alan took a deep breath. "Maria, do you remember what happened yesterday?" Her eyes flickered with confusion. "You mean—" "The safe, sir," he nodded. "Yes, the safe." Maria looked down at her hands. "I hope I did the right thing, sir. I didn't want to touch anything. I thought someone might have forgotten to close it. Alan leaned forward, his voice quieter now. Tell me something. Why didn't you take anything? No one was watching. You could have walked away with enough money to change your life. Maria looked up, meeting his eyes. Because, sir, that money isn't mine. Alan's brows furrowed. But you're poor, aren't you? You could use it. Anyone else in your place would have taken at least a small amount. She smiled faintly. Maybe they would have, but my mother used to say, if you steal gold today, tomorrow your peace will be stolen too. I've already lost enough peace in my life, sir. I don't want to lose more. Alan fell silent. Her words hit him harder than any insult could have. He stared at her hands, rough and worn. You said you've lost peace. What did you mean by that? Maria sighed softly. My younger brother, Daniel. He's sick. He has a heart condition. I've been working here to pay for his medicine and his treatment. Every rupee I earn goes to him. Alan froze. Medicine? You never told me that. She shrugged gently. It's not something you'd want to hear, sir. You pay me for my work, not my problems. Alan felt a painful twist in his chest. All this time he'd thought of her as just another servant. But she'd been quietly fighting her own battle, without asking for pity, without complaining. Maria, he said quietly, why didn't you ever ask me for help? She smiled faintly. Because, sir, help that's asked for never feels the same as help that's offered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Alan stood and walked toward the same safe that had started all of this. He opened it slowly and pulled out his checkbook. Maria's eyes widened. Sir, what are you doing? Alan didn't answer. He scribbled a number on the page, so large that Maria's jaw dropped when she saw it. Sir, I can't take this, she stammered. It's too much. Please, Alan raised a hand to stop her. You've earned it. Not because of the cleaning, not because of your work, but because you reminded me what honesty really means. Her eyes filled with tears. Sir, I don't understand. Alan took a deep breath. Maria, I tested you. I left the safe open on purpose. I thought you'd steal. I even put a camera in this room to catch you doing it. But instead you called me. You protected what wasn't even yours. You made me see how small I've become. Maria gasped. You tested me. He nodded, shame flooding his face. Yes, and now I wish I never had. She looked down, silent. The air between them grew heavy. Alan continued, his voice breaking. All these years I thought money could buy everything. Respect, trust, loyalty. But you showed me that there are still people in this world who can't be bought. People who are rich without having a single coin. A tear rolled down his cheek. You made me realize how poor I really am. Maria's own eyes shimmered. Sir, please don't say that. You're not poor, you just forgot what matters for a while. Alan let out a trembling laugh. Maybe you're right. Maybe I did. He placed the check in front of her. Take it, use it for your brother's treatment. And one more thing. Maria shook her head, still refusing. Sir, I can't, but he interrupted firmly. You can, and you will. Because from now on, you're not my maid anymore. You're my house manager. You'll be paid triple what you earn now. I want you to manage the staff, handle the household budget, and make sure this place runs like it always has, just with your heart leading it. Maria covered her mouth in disbelief. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say nothing, Alan said softly. Just accept it. You've done more for me than anyone ever has. For a moment, both stood there in silence, one humbled by guilt, the other overwhelmed by grace. Finally, Maria whispered, Thank you, sir, for trusting me. Alan smiled faintly. No, Maria, thank you, for teaching me to trust again. As she left the room, Alan's eyes followed her. He turned back to the same safe that once held his fortune, his pride, his fear. Now, it held something far greater. A lesson. He sat back in his chair and whispered to himself, All this time, I thought I was testing her. But maybe she was sent to test me. The mansion, once cold and lifeless, felt different that day. The air seemed lighter, warmer, and for the first time in years, Alan Reeves didn't feel alone. He looked out the window and saw Maria outside, talking with the gardener, smiling, really smiling. For a man who had spent his life counting money, it was strange how one honest heart could make him feel richer than ever before. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and a single tear escaped down his cheek. Sometimes, he thought, the real treasure isn't inside the safe, it's the heart that guards it.